Namaskritya
Narayanam Namaskritya
Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasa Tato Jayam Udiraye. Is there enough air? Do we have? Any extra oxygen will be appreciated. The brain runs on oxygen. Advantage. Hare Kṛṣṇa, Hare Kṛṣṇa, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Who here likes air?
Everybody.
Who here breathes air regularly? Okay, I think we could do it. Today we're going to hear from the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Everybody ready?
Yes. Yes. Putting our
Good. I like that. Okay. Today we're going to hear from the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, first canto, third chapter, 40th verse. If I'm not incorrect. Is that what's up there? I'll say, and then you can please repeat. We'll go line by line. Idam Bhagavatam Nama.
Idam Bhagavatam Nama.
Puranam Brahma Samhitam. Uttama-shloka Charitam. Chikara Bhagavan Rishi. Shaya Shaya Lokasya. Dhamnam Swastayanam Maha. And now we'd like to ask two people to also chant. Go.
Okay. Idam Bhagavatam Nama.
Idam Bhagavatam Nama.
Puranam Brahma Samhitam.
Puranam Brahma Samhitam.
Uttama-shloka Charitam.
Uttama-shloka Charitam.
Chakra
Bhagavan Rishi. Chakara Bhagavan Rishi. Nishrayasaya Lokasya.
Danyam Swasti Ayanam Mahat.
Dhamnam Swastayanam Mahat. May I please have the first canto Bhagavatam from the altar? Thank you. Yes.
Idam Bhagavatam Nama.
Idam Bhagavatam Nama.
Puranam
Puranam
Samhitam.
Puranam Brahma Samhitam.
Uttama-shloka Charitam.
Uttama-shloka Charitam.
Chakara Bhagavan Rishi.
Chakara Bhagavan Rishi.
Nishrayasaya Lokasya.
Nishrayasaya Lokasya.
Dhanam Swastyanam Mahat.
Danyam Swastayanam Mahat. Now I'm going to read the word for word. Please repeat after me. Idam.
Idam.
This.
This.
Bhagavatam.
Bhagavatam.
Book containing the narration of the personality of Godhead and his pure devotees.
Book containing the narration of the
Nama.
Nama.
Of the name.
Of the name.
Puranam.
Puranam.
Supplementary to the Vedas.
Supplementary to the Vedas.
Brahma Samhitam.
Brahma Samhitam.
Incarnation of Lord Śrī Krishna.
Incarnation of Lord Śrī Krishna.
Uttama-shloka.
Uttama-shloka.
Of the personality of God.
Of the personality of God.
Charitam.
Charitam.
Activities.
Activities.
Shakara.
Chikara.
Compiled.
Compiled.
Bhagavan.
Bhagavan.
Incarnation of the personality of Godhead.
Incarnation of the personality of Godhead.
Rishi.
Rishis.
Śrī Vyasadeva.
Śrī Vyasadeva.
Nishrayasaya.
Nishrayasaya.
For the ultimate good.
For the ultimate good.
Lokasya.
Lokasya.
Of all people.
Of all people.
Danyam.
Danyam.
Fully successful.
Fully successful.
Swastyayanam.
Swastyayanam.
All blissful.
All blissful.
Mahat.
Mahat.
All perfect.
All perfect.
I'll read the translation and purport now. This Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is the literary incarnation of God and it is compiled by Srila Vyasadeva, the incarnation of God. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people, and it is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. Please repeat. This Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is the literary incarnation of God, and it is compiled by Srila Vyasadeva, the incarnation of God. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people, and it is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. Now I'll read Srila Prabhupada's purport. Lord Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu declared that the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is the spotless sound representation of all Vedic knowledge and history. There are selected histories of great devotees who are in direct contact with the personality of Godhead. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is the literary incarnation of Lord Śrī Krishna and is therefore non-different from him. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam should be worshipped as respectfully as we worship the Lord. Thereby we can derive the ultimate blessings of the Lord through its careful and patient study. As God is all light, all bliss, and all perfection, so also is Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, which we can have all the transcendental light of the Supreme Brahman, Śrī Krishna, from the recitation of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, provided it is received through the medium of the transparent spiritual master. Lord Chaitanya's private secretary, Srila Swarup Damodar Goswami, advised all intending visitors who came to see the Lord at Puri to make a study of the Bhagavatam from the Person Bhagavatam. Person Bhagavatam is the self-realized bona fide spiritual master, and through him only can one understand the lessons of Bhagavatam in order to receive the desired result. One can derive from the study of the Bhagavatam all benefits that are possible to be derived from the personal presence of the Lord. I'll read that again. One can derive from the study of the Bhagavatam all benefits that are possible to be derived from the personal presence of the Lord. It carries with it all the transcendental blessings of Lord Śrī Krishna that we can expect from his personal contact. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Śrī Caitanya Manohishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamaham Kadati Swapatantikam Deham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Parakamalam Sri Guru Vaishnava Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sarvatutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Vishakanitamsha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kantana Mustate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhayusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vansha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityaṁ Shri Advaita Gadadhara Gaura Bhakta-vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. It is a great pleasure to be in your home today. Thank you very much for holding this gathering, especially on the occasion of inviting Krishna in the form of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam to be in your home. This is all auspicious. And we are here for this historical event. This verse is in the first canto of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, in which we're getting an introduction to the mood and purpose of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam begins with a declarative statement, Janmadya Sayataha. No questions. And this is giving a definition of the absolute truth. It's that from whom everything else emanates, the source of all emanations. And also that the supreme absolute truth is abhigna and surat, is cognizant, fully aware of everything. It's not that our original source is a dead stone. There is no case in which matter, which is a lower energy of the supreme, coalesces and then becomes conscious. Consciousness exists and matter exists, and there are two different energies, as Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita. Bhumir apo analo vayu kammano bhutir evacha ahankara ityame binna prakritir ashtada. There's earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. And then he says, Aparayam ritasvanyam prakritim vidiniparam jivaputam mahabaho yayedam varite jagat. Besides these material elements, there's the superior energy, which is the living entity. We can notice that as soon as a living entity leaves the body, then the body becomes worthless. The second that a soul leaves the body, that's the conscious entity that's part and parcel of Krishna, then the body starts to decompose. It's only because we're in the body that we have light and we have feeling that's coming from the soul and the super soul. And then the Bhagavatam is purpose is described. It comes, it's describing the nature of the absolute truth for the benefit of everyone, that he's the supreme controller. And then Dharma projita kaitavo tra paramo nirmat saranam sutam vejam vastavam atra shivadam tapat trayamulanam Śrīmad-Bhāgavate Mahamuni krite kimvapraya ishvara sadyo hridyavarudite tra kritibi shushu shubishtakshanat. The Bhagavatam says that this book is for those who actually want to worship God. It's not for any material benediction, because material benediction in and of itself is, the phrase is a misnomer. There is no such thing as a material benediction, as was proved by Hiranyakashipu. As spiritual beings, we can't handle matter very well. As soon as we grasp it, as soon as we look at matter and we think, this is for me, I'm going to control it, then it starts controlling us. And therefore, Bhagavatam begins where Krishna leaves off in the Bhagavad Gita, where he advises us to don't get involved with any kind of activity that is meant to engross you in matter more. Don't claim that you own anything in the material world. He says in the Bhagavad Gita, Brahmanyadaya karmani sangam tyakva karotiya lipitena sapapena padma patram vivambasa. He advises us all to live in the world without claiming ownership to anything. Just as a bank teller doesn't claim that this is my money. The day that the bank teller says that, then he's fired because he missed the point. So if we live in the world and we think this is mine, my body, my country, my sports team, my house, everything my, this is illegal. That's why dharma projita kaitava. Kaitava means cheating. And all types of cheating, says the author of the Bhagavatam, is now pushed aside. And we're entering into a new realm, a realm where it's assumed that we understand this basic science of the Bhagavad Gita. And it's for those who want to actually taste the real nectar of life. And that brings us to the next verse. Gama kalpataro galitam palam shukamukadam rita draga samyutam pibata bhagavatam rasamayal alayam mahuraho rasika bhuvi bhavaka. Those who are eager to get real taste, the taste that everybody's looking for and not getting. The Bhagavatam in the first 9 cantos exhaustively explores all the psychological conditions of the human and shows us that when one's attached to matter and has some intention to enjoy matter, that there's a dead end. It's a fallacy. And it brings us to this conclusion that we can really be happy by connecting with Krishna through service. In fact, Prahlad Maharaj, in one of his prayers to Lord Nrsimhadev, says, Kutra Shisha Shuti Sukham Mrigatrishni Rupa. Everybody's talking about happiness in the material world. He said, but where is it actually? Kutra. Where is that happiness?
In the spiritual.
No comments necessary. No coins necessary to operate the creek. So the Rasika is one who knows that the essence of life is beyond mixing it up with the material nature and becomes dedicated to the source of all happiness. I was saying, Prahlad Maharaj, he mentions that the happiness that we're chasing after, literally, here in the material world, is a mirage. It's a Mrigatrishni Rupa. Mriga means a deer. And there's a way in which a deer might see water in the distance and then run after it. But because it's a mirage, it's not actual water, it recedes along with the deer chasing it, and then he dies of thirst. So that's basically what happens to me here in the material world. As I'm pursuing, as a little baby, I'm thinking, as soon as I can get a little older, I can walk around the room like my elder brother, and then I'll really have something. And then when I'm walking around the room, then I start thinking, if I'm a little older, then I can sit up at the table. I don't have to have this car seat. And then a little older, I think, let me become a teenager. Then I'll be really good. And I remember in school thinking that freshman, that's not very good. I want to be a senior. And then you get into college and you think, oh, just a freshman again, starting over. And then somebody starts into business, thinks, oh, now I'm a junior partner. I want to be a senior partner. And then it becomes a senior partner and think, oh, it's not enough anymore. I have to own my own company completely. There's always a pursuit for something more in the material world. And it's like chasing after a mirage. One never actually achieves it. If there's a mirage, just as if there's counterfeit money, it means there's real money somewhere else. So the Bhagavatam says, Vastu, find the real thing, that thing that actually exists. And there you'll find happiness. Find where you can connect to the Supreme Spirit, because we're spiritual. We're not material. So what is the Bhagavatam? Nigama kalpataro galitam palam shukamukhadam rita dravasamritam. It's the perfect sound vibration that's coming from the spiritual world through the mouth of Shukadev Goswami. And who is Shukadev? Shukadev is somebody who cares so little about material world that he has no sense of fashion. When I get dressed in the morning, I think, does this color match my eyes? Does this thing or whatever, does that work? Everyone's always looking, how can I look a little better? Shukadev didn't wear clothes. He cared so little about fashion. That's when you don't care about fashion at all. So, anyway, he didn't look at the material world the way I look at the material world. He didn't look at it at all. He had no interest. In fact, he didn't want to come out of the womb. And Krishna had to come and say, you can come out, you won't get attached. But when he did, he didn't take any chances. You may know the story. He stayed in the womb for over a decade, and he finally came out. And as soon as he came out of the womb, he left home. His father was Srila Vyasadeva. He's an incarnation, a Shakti Vaishnava of the Lord. And he's in such an exalted family. And Vyasadeva saw his son come out of the womb, and then, I'm leaving home now. He didn't even say anything. He just turned around and walked off. And his father called out, wait, just Brahman's thread? No, nothing. Only heard an echo of his own voice, Vyasadeva. And Shukadev was gone. And when he was going off into the forest, he passed Pokor, the place where people bathed, and the ladies were bathing at the time, and they weren't wearing any clothes. But when they saw Shukadeva walk by, they said, "Nah, we don't have to put on our clothes. He doesn't even notice us. He doesn't see the difference between male, female, anything in this world." But Srila Vyasadeva was still after him. And when he came by, they put on their clothes. Even for Srila Vyasadeva, they thought, oh, he sees, but not Shukadeva. This is the stature of the person as being announced in the Bhagavatam, who's speaking the Bhagavatam. Now, of course, Shukadeva Goswami went to the forest because he wanted nothing to do with the material world. Srila Vyasadeva knew something that his son didn't know at that time, and that is that there's a sound vibration, there's variety, there's something to do that's not material. And if you do that thing, then you're not acting materially, and you're also going to be able to stay in that activity forever. And that is hearing Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. So what did he do? Srila Vyasadeva sent some of his disciples into the forest where Shukadeva Goswami was sitting meditating. And he had them recite some verses from the Bhagavatam. For instance, Aho Bhakiyam Stanakala Kutam Jigam Saya Payad Apyasadvi. This is a verse about Putana. It's in the 10th canto of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam that Kamsa was trying to kill Krishna, because those in power, they spend all their energy trying to stay in power. And one of the worst things is to have God hanging around. So he had this natural aversion to Krishna, and he wanted to kill him. So he sent different assassins, and one of them was a baby killer. Babies, cover your ears and tell the story. So Putana came to the house of Nandini Yashoda in the Vraj, and Putana disguised herself. Although she looked like a ghastly demon, she disguised herself as a beautiful maiden. It was a mystic power. And everyone was so enamored of her beauty and grace and gentle nature that they invited her in, especially the cowherd men. They said, "Oh, please come in." And she went in as a nursemaid and picked up baby Krishna, who then summarily sucked her breast, which was smeared with poison. The intention was to kill the baby. But he absorbed the poison. He took out her life air, he took out the milk, and then sucked out her life. She assumed her gigantic form again, and baby Krishna was happily playing on her breast, which is like a hilltop. That story we know well. When Shukadeva Goswami heard that and other verses about the mercy of Krishna, in this verse, Sri Uddhava says, who would take shelter of anyone else besides Krishna, who liberated, not just liberated, but gave a position in the spiritual world to Putana, who came to kill him. He only saw the good in her, that, okay, yeah, she put a little poison, but she tried to act like my mother. So I'll give her a position in the spiritual world as my mother. So Uddhava says, who would take shelter of anybody else but Krishna? He's so kind and so merciful. So when Shukadeva Goswami heard some of these verses from the Bhagavatam, his mind became attracted. And being intelligent, he could understand, I'm not attached to anything material. He could see that for himself. But I am attached to the sound vibration. What is it? So he came back to his homestead and began his tutelage under Srila Vyasadeva to learn the verses of the Bhagavatam, which he did. And of course, the history of Bhagavatam is such that although Srila Vyasadeva himself is the literary incarnation of God, he compiled, actually he's the compiler. Chakara, Vyasadeva means an editor. He compiles the Vedic literature. It's not that he writes them, they're eternal, but he puts them together. For instance, there's one Veda, but then he divides it into 4. And actually 3 of those Vedas are specifically mentioned. 3 Vedi, for instance, those are specific to the practices of sacrifice and so forth. One of the Vedas is sort of like voodoo, so the sages don't mention it very much. And all of those he then summarized. He gave headlines to them in the Upanishads and gave a marker to each one of the philosophical concepts within the Brahma Sutra, the Vedanta Sutra, starting with the Tato Brahma Jignasa, etc. And then he compiled the Mahabharata because he was thinking in the Kali Yuga age, in this age, people don't have time for philosophy, nor do they have the brain power. That's established at Naimisharanya, where the Bhagavatam is also spoken by Sutta Goswami, where he said, Prayinal Payushashapya, Kalavasmin Yugajana, Manda Sumanda Matayo, Manda Bhagya Hipadrita. In this iron age of Kali, men have but short lives. They're quarrelsome, lazy, misguided, unlucky, and above all, always disturbed. That's the cell phone. Cell phone culture. So, what's someone to do? Srila Vyasadeva was thinking ahead. Let's give them a novel-like scripture, which is Mahabharata. You ask people, which one do you like? Mahabharata. Stories, intrigue, war, lots of killing, and very interesting. And then Bhagavad Gita is nested within it to give the philosophy. But Srila Vyasadeva, even after compiling the Upanishads, the Mahabharata, the different Puranas, including the precursor to the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, which was kind of a summary of a little bit about the devotional life, but not complete. Then what happened was he became morose. He did his service, but he didn't feel right. So his spiritual master, who's his spiritual master?
Narada.
Correct. He got one in. So Narada Muni came to visit his disciple, Srila Vyasadeva. And Vyasadeva said, I don't feel complete. And Narada said, of course you don't feel complete. You blew it. All this compilation, Mahabharata, all the Upanishads, all this thing, very indirect. You're telling people about fruit of activities in the Vedas, how to perform sacrifices so you can get ahead in the material world. And you're also giving them very indirect information about God. He says that this is Nashobate Jnanam Alam Niranjanam, Naishkamyam Aptachuta Bhava Varjitam, Nashobate Jnanam Alam Niranjanam, Kutakuna Shashvara Padramishvare, Nacharpitam Karma Yadapya Karanam. He says, even though you're speaking about this topic of self-realization and Niranjana, you're working without any desire for fruit of result and detachment from the material world, all these things described in Vedas, Puranas. He said it's still Nashobate, it's not beautiful. It doesn't light up the soul. Why? Because Naishkamyam Apya Chuta Bhava Varjitam. It doesn't have a Chuta Bhava. There's no connection with Krishna. There's no connection with the personality of Godhead. There's no relationship described. So he said, this is all indirect and it won't satisfy the self. What to speak of fruit of activities that you've mentioned that are suffering from beginning to end. So he said, you have to tell about the pastimes of the personality of Godhead so that everyone can hear them and understand who is Krishna, what is his relationship with his devotees. You tell that, then their hearts will change. Tadvag visargo, he says. Tadvag visargo janataga viplavo yasmin prati shlokam bhavati bhaktipi. Namanyanantasya yashom kitanya shinvanti gayanti grananti sarava. That the sound vibration of the Bhagavatam, which is eternal, and which describes the pastimes of the personality of Godhead with his devotees, said this is a different creation altogether. This comes from the spiritual world. And when you hear it, tadvag visargo janataga viplavo, it means your life will be transformed. It will be turned around 180 degrees by hearing the vibration of the Bhagavatam. And he says, Namanyan Tashiyashon Kitaniyan, it's full of the names, the unlimited names of the personality of Godhead. And so he says, those who are sincere, they'll listen to the Bhagavatam and they'll become benefited. As we hear in today's verse, no difference between Bhagavatam and Krishna himself. And in fact, and I'll wrap this up in a minute so we can have conversation. In fact, in the Bhagavatam, when describing the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam in this very chapter we're in today, Sutta Goswami says that this Bhagavatam, Krishna Sadamo Bhagate Dharmaganadi Visaha, Kalunashta Durshamesha, Purar Narko Dunodita, just after Krishna left for his own abode, which is imagine the light of everyone's life, the source of everyone's life. Krishna's Atmanam Akilatmanam. You know how much we like ourselves? How much do you like yourself?
A lot.
A lot. So much so that, like our body, because I think my body's myself, that's the most important thing to me. Everything about my body, I want to stay in my body, I want to see my body, everything. So ourself, but when we leave the body, then the body's no longer interesting to us because we're not in it anymore, nor is the super soul. So Shukadeva says, Atmanam Akilatmanam, Krishna is the soul of our soul. Imagine how attracted we are to the soul of our soul. So the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam means to revive us after Krishna has personally left the world. He's walking on the earth, and therefore it's beautiful and opulent, and everything works properly for everybody. And all those who are good are elevated. All those who are bad are purified by Krishna. But then he leaves. Then darkness descends. But just as the darkness is descending on the world when Krishna leaves, then the light comes back up immediately in the Bhagavatam. Krishna swadamo pakate dharma ganadi visaha. Those who have lost their vision to the dense darkness of the age of Kali will get light from the Purana. And it's the light of Krishna directly. So the solution to all life's problems, as it was, if Shukadeva Goswami took advantage of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, and if the sages in Naimisaranya who had asked the question, what's the way to derive the greatest benefit of life? And not only that, distribute it to others. These are the high-minded personalities of the world that are mentioned in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Then we, in this Kali Yuga age, which is has descended upon the world, we can see it now, the anomalies that are all around us in this age. These can be counteracted by hearing the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. So, as I began, it's one of the 5 most important aspects of devotional service. There are 64 items to practice in devotional service. Out of those 64, 5 are particularly important. They're called Panchangam Bhakti. And one of those five is hearing Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam in the association of like-minded devotees, preferably who are more advanced than oneself. Because if you're the smartest one in the room, you're in the wrong room. And if you hear Bhagavatam every day, or as much as possible, take time to hear the Bhagavatam together in your family. Read it out loud for your family. Let everyone hear it. If there's a baby in the womb, the baby should hear the whole Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam before it's born. If you want little Shukadeva to jump out, or a Dhruva Maharaj, or a great saint, let the baby, let the fetus even hear the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Once children are in the home, let them become acquainted with the stories of the Bhagavatam, Dhruva Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, all the stories of Krishna in Vrindavan. And for ourselves who are so overwhelmed with working in the material world, we should work. In the spiritual world, there's no work, only play. Yay! Krishna has bare feet. Do you ever notice that? He doesn't have to go to job interviews, doesn't have to go to a factory, doesn't have to get in a car, nothing. Spiritual world, I'll repeat it again, it's all play and no work. You can say, Haribol.
Haribol.
How do we enter that realm? How do we break the bonds of karma? Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, just by hearing it. Shrinvatam swakata Krishna punya shravana kirtana hridyan takstohi badrani pitunoti surit satam. Krishna is Surit. He's so kind. He comes with us in the heart. But how do we take advantage of his presence? Hearing Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Because if you just use your ears, now take a look, notice if you have any ears. Test it out. Go ahead, check. When's the last time you actually checked in and see if you have ears? And if next time you look in the mirror, just check your ear and see what it looks like. You might say, oh, that person has nice ears. But if you look at your ear long enough, you'll think that's really a strange looking appendage. It's all convoluted. It's called, what's that there for? It's there for hearing Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. It catches sound. In fact, if you just put on a cap and it blocks the top of your ear, you'll notice you're not getting the sound completely. This is like a satellite dish. And it's thrown in for free with every human body. And this is all you need, these two ears and a little patience to sit and hear the sound vibration of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. And then what happens? Krishna, who's within the heart of every living being, helps us. And so many times people say, spiritual life, I can't do it. I don't have the strength. How do I get up? How do I move up? Sit and hear Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Hear the pastimes of Krishna. Then Krishna within the heart helps to winnow out, that's W-I-N-N-O-W, winnow out the various kinds of attachments that we have, inordinate attachments to the material world. And he clears our way to go back to the spiritual world. So that you're installing Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam in your home is the biggest deal. A house, all these houses around here that don't have Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, imagine walking into a house where not only don't they have a Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, they've never even heard of it. What are they going to do instead? Watch golf? Watch a grown man hitting a ball into a hole? They're going to watch some commercial where somebody's trying to sell them something that is supposedly going to make their life better. There's no juice in the material world anywhere. Well, maybe there's a drop. Says Vidyapati says it's like the desert and you're thirsty, you want water. I'm dying of thirst, please help me. Yes, I'll help you. Here's an eyedropper, I'll give you one drop. That's the material world. It's not enough. But from the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, nectar is pouring, the water's gushing out. And anytime your mind tells you, oh, I don't have time to read Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, we don't have time not to read Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Parikshit Maharaj has 7 days to live, and we have no idea how long we have to live. We can't afford to waste any time. So bringing the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam into one's home and then getting in the habit of hearing it every day, maybe marking how many pages you read with your family, that's how you advance in spiritual life, period. Without hearing Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam and hearing Prabhupada's purports, there's no tangible advancement in spiritual life. It's very distant. It can take 10 years, 15 years, 100 years, 100 lifetimes, unless one actually applies oneself. So congratulations to you for taking this into your home and bringing us here to discuss the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, albeit for just a minute, because even if we spend 5-10 hours in a day to discuss Bhagavatam and go into it, it won't be enough. We'll always want more. We'll always be hankering to hear more and more. How much more time can we spend hearing Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam? Om Tat Sat. Now, at the risk of running over time, I'm leaving some time that we can have some discussion. So discussion means if you, especially if you can generate a question that actually deepens the conversation, then you've added a lot to this assembly. If you have a burning question, it means that you're studying the science of Krishna consciousness. Just like when you're practicing music, or let's say you're not practicing, your teacher gives you an assignment and you don't practice. When you go back to see your music teacher the next week, you don't have any questions. Why? Because questions come when you try and then you run into a place that you can't figure out how to get across the bridge. And you have to go ask your teacher, how do I do that? So when we're hearing Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, we should be generating more and more questions to ask a qualified speaker and say, like, what does this mean? How do I do that? And things like that. So we'll try for that first. And if not, then next time we're going to have to read Bhagavatam together 5 hours a day. Okay, those who said Hari Bol, you're...
Hari Bol.
Yeah, Hari Bol. Do you have any questions? I know that's intimidating now. I knew you would. Okay, let me start with an underhand pitch. That's what we call in softball. So see if you have a reflection. Anything you heard from the conversation or the monologue so far, that stuck in your mind from the purport, from the verse? What piqued your interest? And you want to say something about? Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Kṛṣṇa Maharaj.
Hare Kṛṣṇa.
So the word you said that bringing Bhagavatam home is like bringing Krishna. So
We
just-
said about bringing Bhagavatam home is like bringing Krishna.
So just by reading Krishna, we can know everything about Krishna.
Yes, just by hearing about Krishna from the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, we can know everything about Krishna, because as the verse today says, there's no difference between the Bhagavatam and Krishna, identical. So the sound incarnation of Krishna comes into our home through the Bhagavatam. Of course, when you have a Bhagavatam on the shelf, you don't want the plastic still on it. You know, we broke open the first canto today. So when you look at some of these Bhagavatams that you should see, not only are all the seals broken, but when you open it, it doesn't look like, you know, that little bookmarker is still stuck in there like the factory put it in. It should be a little frayed on the end. And maybe you see, you know, little notes stuck in here and there. And maybe when you look at somebody, when you're on the phone and you have the Bhagavatam behind them, you know, you're speaking on Zoom, there should be a few volumes that are checked out somewhere. Oh, you're reading fourth canto, eh? Just see that. This is real spiritual life. If you're actively reading the Bhagavatam every day, you're in spiritual life. And oftentimes people say, well, oh, you know, I'm in Hare Kṛṣṇa, but I don't feel it. Read Bhagavatam. You'll feel it, guaranteed, because it's Krishna. There's no substitute for hearing Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. It's the only way to become attracted to the spiritual world is by hearing about the spiritual world, and that's the place to hear it. Okay, yes, a couple more. Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
I really like the Prasni made Mahabharata and Bhagavatam.
He's mentioning he likes the comparison between the Mahabharata and the Bhagavatam,
Which is more beneficial.
which is more beneficial. Yes, actually, this is okay. I'll call in units. This is the conversation in the first canto, 5th chapter of the Bhagavatam. It's extremely important conversation. It's when Srila Vyasadeva and Narada meet together, and it proves one of the points that's made in the earlier or in the later chapters of the Bhagavatam, that the Bhagavatam is not an ordinary book. It's nirgrantha. Nirgrantha means that it's not a book like any other book. It's not from the material world. It's a spiritual book. And Atmaramaschamunayo nirgrantha apyarukrame, that those who are beyond the material world, they like Bhagavatam. They like Bhagavatam. Therefore, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu makes the case again and again and again that this book is transcendental. It has nothing to do with the material world. So Narada, just as a repeat, not exactly a repeat, but just mentioning more about this 5th chapter, he calls what Vyasadeva has done so far before he's produced the Bhagavatam, Jugupsitam. Jugupsitam karma. He says, you've done something abominable. You've given people hope, like left the door open for them here in the material world, that maybe, you know, I can do spiritual life, but I'll do material life at the same time. The Bhagavatam is actually very radical. It's saying, no mas. Anybody speak Spanish? I'll teach you Spanish. Say no mas.
No mas.
No more.
No more.
When somebody says, you want to stay in the material world, you say,
No mas.
no mas. So the Bhagavatam is for people who say, no mas, I don't want to stay in the material world anymore. I don't want to, you know, in the Mahabharata, you'll notice that they're all trying to go to heaven. We don't want to go to heaven. You know, and Narada's going like, what'd you write? What are you talking? Tell about spiritual world. Goloka namni nijadamni chaletata devi mahesha haridama sateshu teshu. Te te prabhavanichaya vihitashtayena. Govindamari Purusham. Tell about Goloka Vrindavan. That's Krishna's Nijadam. We don't want to hear about Devidam, except for to understand that it's not our home. We don't want to hear about Maheshdam. We don't even want to hear that much about Haridam. We want to hear about Nijadam, Krishna's highest planet, where he has loving exchanges with his devotees in 5 rasas. And by hearing that, we hear from the students of Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu who are fully dedicated to Bhagavatam and explicating its meaning. This is what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked his followers, his disciples, who are highly intelligent, actual members of the spiritual world appearing with him in this world, to teach. How is it that you make advancement in spiritual life? And emphasize the Bhagavatam. Arajo Bhagavan Vijesha Tanayasta Dhamma Vrindavana Ramya Kachidupasana Rajavidu Vardhina Vokuta. He said, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Pramanam Amalam Prema Pumarto Mahan. That these are the opinion of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Krishna and his Dham are non-different. That's the highest method of worshiping Krishna was that which is shown by the gopis of Vrindavan. And the spotless Purana is the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. It's the authority on everything. If you want to check in and say, is this correct? Is that correct? Consult the Bhagavatam. And Prema Pumarta Mohan, the ultimate goal of life is to develop pure love for Krishna. Okay, your turn.
The one that I like, that you mentioned, that's not Krishna. Bhagavatam is like, for good people, it's like lifting up, and for bad people, it's like purification.
For good people, it's lifting up. For bad people, it's purification. Yeah. And Krishna says, yes.
Just a question,
Yeah.
maybe I didn't hear it properly. You said Bhagavatam is like after Krishna left.
Bhagavatam appears after Krishna left.
But Bhagavatam is like from his small age, like from.
Bhagavatam is from his small age. So how is it that it appears after Krishna leaves the planet? Krishna's pastimes are eternal. His childhood pastimes are always going on. They're going on right now. Even in the material world, they're always going on somewhere. Just like right now, there's Mangalarti somewhere on this planet by Prabhupada's grace. Did you know that?
Yes.
You can look at your iPhone and find out who's having Mangalarti somewhere. Could be the penguins in Antarctica. But somewhere in the world, there's a Mangalarti going on. And somewhere in the universe, Krishna's childhood pastimes, he's enacting his pastimes, childhood. Each one of his pastimes individually are eternal. They're always going on. And the Bhagavatam's eternal. It just cycles through. It appears at different times. So Krishna, every day, leaves Vrindavan and goes to Mathura. Every day. It happens over and over again. But the devotees, they're experiencing as if it was the first time. So Bhagavatam is eternal literature. It's always existed, always will exist. It just appears at various times, just like Krishna. In fact, Krishna doesn't descend to the material world. Although we say Krishna comes to the material world, he appears in the material world. It's a misnomer also because Krishna's already here. He's Eko Pyaso Racharitam Jagaranda Kotim Yashakti Rasti Jagaranda Yada Chayataranta Andantarasta Paramanu Chayantarasta Govindamadi Purushanta Mahambhajami. He's already there, present within every atom, but he appears at various times. So same with Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Now he's appeared in your house. This is a big deal. It's the biggest of deals. Prabhu, Ramya Prabhu. Two questions from Ramya Prabhu.
There is a statement in Bhagavatam that by hearing Bhagavatam reduces modes of passion.
It says in the Bhagavatam, by hearing the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, it reduces the modes of passion and ignorance almost to nil.
How does that happen? And is there a quality to that hearing?
How does that happen? And is there a quality to that hearing? Yes, there is. In fact, may I have the first canto back, please? I'm going to read you a little more. I'll give it to you in Prabhupada's words directly. Because this purport that I'm going to read you now will stimulate you in spiritual life so much, and your attraction to Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam will become so strong that you may lose interest in the material world altogether. So if you don't want that to happen, please go out in the porch for a minute, okay? Anybody who doesn't want to make rapid spiritual advancement and hear something that may change his or her life forever, please go outside. No takers? Everybody staying?
Yeah.
All right. So Prabhu asked very important questions. And now I'm going to read Prabhupada's version. So this comes in the last verse of this same chapter that we're reading from. This is called Krishna is the source of all incarnations. And here's the verse translation and purport, number 44. Are you all ready?
Yes.
Okay. O learned Brahmanas, when Shukadeva Goswami recited Bhagavatam there in the presence of Emperor Parikshit, I heard him with rapt attention, and thus by his mercy I learned the Bhagavatam from that great and powerful sage. Now I shall try to make you hear the very same thing as I learned it from him and as I have realized it. Srila Prabhupada. One can certainly see directly the presence of Lord Śrī Krishna in the pages of Bhagavatam if one has heard it from a self-realized great soul like Shukadeva Goswami. One cannot, however, learn Bhagavatam from a bogus hired reciter whose aim of life is to earn some money out of such recitation and employ the earning in sex indulgence. No one can learn Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam who is associated with persons engaged in sex life. That is the secret of learning Bhagavatam. No one can learn Bhagavatam from one who interprets the text by his mundane scholarship. One has to learn Bhagavatam from the representative of Shukadeva Goswami and no one else, if one at all wants to see Lord Śrī Krishna in the pages. That is the process, and there is no alternative. Sutta Goswami is a bona fide representative of Shukadeva Goswami because he wants to present the message which he received from the great learned Brahmana, Shukadeva Goswami, great learned Brahmana. Shukadeva Goswami presented Bhagavatam as he heard it from his great father, and so also Sutta Goswami is presenting Bhagavatam as he had heard it from Shukadeva Goswami. Simple hearing is not all. One must realize the text with proper attention. The word nivishta means that Sutta Goswami drank the juice of Bhagavatam through his ears. That is the real process of receiving Bhagavatam. One should hear with rapt attention from the real person, and then he can at once realize the presence of Lord Krishna in every page. The secret of knowing Bhagavatam is mentioned here. No one can give rapt attention who is not pure in mind. No one can be pure in mind who is not pure in action. No one can be pure in action who is not pure in eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating. But somehow or other, if one hears with rapt attention from the right person, at the very beginning, one can assuredly see Lord Śrī Krishna in person in the pages of Bhagavatam. So that goes to one of your questions. What is the quality of hearing that's important? The quality of hearing that's important is that one's absorbed in the subject matter because one's, not because of, but as one amends one's lifestyle. Yesham tantakatam papam jananam punyakarmanam teton va mohanir mukta bachantimam dhridavrta. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita 7th chapter that when you amend your lifestyle so you're not committing any gross material activities, not committing any, that didn't make sense. If you're not engaged in gross material activities, you're not transgressing the Shastra by committing sinful activities, then Dhridavrta, you can be more determined in your practice of spiritual life and your practice of hearing. So that's one aspect. You're living the lifestyle. And one must be very eager to hear the subject matter. That's when it becomes especially potent. So how does it work? Krishna describes in the Bhagavatam itself, Shrinvatam swa kata Krishna punya shravana kirtana. First he says that the sound vibration of the Bhagavatam itself is punya. How do you get wealth? How do you get credit in this world? Everyone wants to get some points somewhere by hearing Bhagavatam. It's substantive. You hear the sound vibration, it gives you this credit in your heart. Your heart's like a bank, and you put in it, what you get out of it is what you put into it. So the wealthiest people are those who are hearing Bhagavatam, they're taking it into their hearts. Punya Shravana Kirtana. Then the verse says, Hridyan Taksto Hivadrani. That is that Krishna is situated within your heart. Check and see this field. Take a sec. Is he in there? Yeah. Hridyan Taksto Hivadrani. So he's situated there in the Hridi. The Hridyan Anta, inside. He's in the heart. Hridyan Taksto Hivadrani. And Abhadrani means everything that's inauspicious in your life. Do you have anything that's inauspicious in your life? Anyone? 2 people, 3. Inauspicious. No? Okay, a couple people. This is the Bhagavatam's for you. Abhadrani, anything that's troubling you. Like devotees don't want to be attached. They're just like, I wish I could have full attention when I chant my japa. Yes or yes?
Yes.
I wish I could, all I want to do is hear Bhagavatam.
Yes.
I just want to go out and give Bhagavatam to others.
Yes.
But I'm attracted to this, that, cricket, bowlers, sixes. I got a sixer. Who got the 6? Who's playing the game? Blah, blah, blah. There's all this noise and I'm still attracted to it. So, Bhadrani, these are all worldly things that are just troublesome. In fact, just slight diversion, going into the 5th chapter of the Bhagavatam, the 1st canto, Narada tells Vyasadeva that anything you desire to describe that's different in vision from the Lord simply disturbs the mind, the way the wind disturbs a boat on the water that has no resting place. It just blows you all over the place. Only the Bhagavatam sets you on the course. So Hridyan Taksto Hibadrani Vidunoti, this is the key word. Vidunoti, it's a device you can use to purify cotton. So it has cords that are pulled taut. That means they're tight. And then you put the impure cotton. Cotton's not all fluffy and white when you first pick it. It's got all kinds of impurities in it. You put it on top, and then there's a way in which in this box called the Vidunoti, the cords get vibrated. And then all the impurities fall through the cracks. And what you get on top, fluffy white cotton. On the bottom, all the impurities are winnowed out. Second time I used that word today. I must like it. So there's a process that's being mentioned here. Vidunoti suhrit satam, that Krishna is a suhrit. He's the best friend. He's really our only friend, ultimately. He's there within the heart. And when he notices that you're hearing Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, he helps to take away the impurities. He's known as Vidunoti. He's the one who purifies the heart. So there's some magic that happens there. We have to have our sincere endeavor to hear, but Krishna will do his work also. And there's an example of this in the Bhagavatam itself. Mother Yashoda, when she became frustrated with her baby, she was breastfeeding her baby. She had him on her lap, had Krishna on her lap, and then the milk on the stove, which was for Krishna, boiled over. And she put Krishna down to take care of something else that was for his service. And then Krishna was like, "What'd you put me down for?" And started crying. And he had these false tears coming into his eyes. And he became a little indignant that my mother put me down. And so Yashoda was taking care of the milk. And then little baby Krishna picked up a stone and broke one of the pots and started feeding the yogurt to the monkeys. And then left little forensic evidence, little tiny footprints with all Krishna's markings on them were there in the butter, actually along the floor. And he escaped out into the courtyard. And Yashoda came back, found the broken pot, butter on the ground, monkeys eating butter, and little footprints leading out to the outdoors. And she realized that she had an escapee, jailbreak. So she came out of the courtyard, saw little baby Krishna. It's like, come back. And not coming back. And he figured she's after me now because I broke the pot. And so he started scampering as fast as he could go on his little baby legs. And Mother Yashoda was chasing after him. Very difficult to catch up with the absolute truth. That's Anejari kam manaso javiyo naina deva nuvam purvanarshat tadavatu nyanati tishta tasminapo mattarishva dadati. The Sri Upanishad says, even the fastest devas, the most powerful, they can't come anywhere close to Krishna. They can chase after him running as fast as they can. So nobody can catch Krishna. But the Yashoda, out of love, Krishna allowed himself to be caught. And Yashoda was nervous about where Krishna was going to go next, so she started trying to tie him up to the grinding mortar. And every time the rope was 2 inches too short. The neighbors, they were looking on, they were laughing that what's going on. So they brought, here's some more, try more. And they tied more. She even took the ribbon from her hair, according to one Purana, and tried to add that on. And more, every time 2 inches too short. Finally, Krishna allowed himself to be tied up. Why? Because she saw Yashoda was perspiring. She was trying. So these 2 inches, 1 inch means we try until we perspire. And the other inch means Krishna notices that we're actually sincerely trying to hear Bhagavatam. And then he meets us the other way and says, yes, I'll show myself. I'll allow myself to be captured. So we have to endeavor to hear. And that means that even if we don't feel some nectar flowing, we understand with our intelligence, this is the right thing to do. And I sit down. And Prabhupada himself said that when I first heard my spiritual master speaking, I didn't understand him. But I didn't go away. And in fact, the last thing I'm going to say, we'll end the class here, but Prabhupada was busy in his life. He had children, he had a business to run, but he had this intense, burning desire to be with his spiritual master, to hear Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam in his presence. So he heard that his guru was doing a yatra. So he signed up for the yatra, but he could only come for 1 day out of the 11 days they were doing the yatra. So he came there, and on this last day, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was lecturing. But there was also an opportunity to see one of the holy places nearby that the devotees hadn't seen yet, to get the last darshan. So there was an opportunity, and the person who was guiding the yatra said, you know, Maharaj was going to speak, or, you know, you can go see the deity. So most people went off to see the deity. A couple of people stayed back to hear Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. One of them was Abai, his future disciple. And he sat there and listened. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta commented in that class. He said, what will they see with their mundane fleshy eyes? You see by hearing. And later on, when Prabhupada, who was at that time known as Abai, was recommended for initiation to his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur remembered that time when he came there to the yatra, and he stayed and listened even though everybody else went to see the deity. He said, I marked him. He likes to hear. And therefore, he is advanced. And Prabhupada certified. He said that, yes, because I liked to hear, or I didn't understand, but I still sat and listened, then I came to understand everything that he was saying. So it's actually a miraculous relationship we have with Krishna. He stays with us in the heart, and the way to revive it is by just sitting and hearing Bhagavatam. That's how Krishna enters our ear, and how we revive the relationship we have within our heart. Tanama rupa charitari sukirtanama srityo kramena rasanama rasini yoja tishtan vraje tananuragi jananudami kalam nayet Akila Itupadesha Saram. Rupa Goswami says that if you want to advance in spiritual life, organize your household, your life around this one principle, and that is that you get to hear Bhagavatam every day. And if you do that, then Tishtan Vraje Tananuragi Jananagami, you'll come to live in Vrindavan. Even you're in the material world. Stani Stita Shrutikatam Tanavanmanobir. You're in your job, you're in your house, you're in everything. But by hearing Bhagavatam, you'll be transferred to the spiritual world, even while you have your feet in this world. And then you'll become so attracted to the spiritual world and the devotees there and the way they're serving Krishna, that when you leave this world, you'll have established your relationship already to Krishna in the spiritual world. You'll already feel like I'm following Krishna behind the footprints of the eternal associates of Krishna in the spiritual world. That's what it means, Tishtanvraje, Tana Anuragi, Tana Anugami. So this is the answer to all the problems of life, and also how to become spiritually advanced. So now we're going to do a quick arti for reading the Bhagavatam. The main ceremony was just hearing in the association of devotees, and then we'll make our departure for Alachua, Florida. Hare Kṛṣṇa. Thank you very much. So now we'll have an arti ceremony. It's already set up, right, Mataji? For the Nama